Flawedcast number 72. I don't want to get Milgram'd out in the middle of nowhere. The social psychology of this century reveals a major lesson. Often, it is not so much the kind of person a man is, as the kind of situation in which he finds himself that determines how he will act. Stanley Milgram.
Flawedcast. Flawedcast. Get in the arena.
Woo! What's up, woo?
Good morning, Jason. How's it going?
I think John's here.
Hola, ¿cómo estás?
Good morning, John. Sorry, John's a little slow this morning.
Coffee hasn't kicked in.
The coffee and the sugar haven't kicked in yet.
Right, yeah.
You look slow. Yeah, you look it.
It's not what you said, you ignorant rich. Anyway, so want to thank.
Are you a? How does he say it?
Our Bill's
retard.
A retard.
Are you a retard?
God, very well could be.
Okay, well maybe we should tell that to Rain Man because he practically bankrupt a casino and he was a retard. What? He was a retard.
Anyway, all right. So we want to.
Good to be here, man. Good
It is. I want to welcome everybody back to another fun-filled episode of Flawedcast. And as always, I am accompanied by the best and finest people I could find crawling down the street.
And they couldn't make it, so here we are.
So I would like to a little shout out. I know it's going to be a week late, but happy birthday to my big sister.
Hey, happy birthday! Yeah.
Today she is the big 5-0. She's been alive for half a century.
I don't know if I envy or pity her.
You probably envy her because you want to be closer to the end.
Good point.
What's wrong with you?
We don't have enough time on this episode. So I want to welcome and once again thank everybody for listening. We can just get the preliminaries out of the way. You can listen to us anywhere podcasts are. Flawedcast CLE. I think we're still on YouTube, currently on Rumble, doing very well. Please subscribe on Rumble. We are on the Project Mockingbird social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We are on Gab. We're back on Parler. MeWe. And with that being said, Jason.
If everyone out there who's not driving a vehicle right now, or a motorcycle, or any other
Tractor.
any other machinery.
Actually, who cares if you're driving? Just do it.
Oh, Jesus, we're getting sued. Place your
communist
right
prick.
hand over your left heart, and please say the Pledge of Allegiance with us.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone. That's how you start off a morning right there.
It is, and I do. I want us to have a conversation along the lines of the episodes that we've had in the past, like when we talked about American Stockholm Syndrome, episode number 45, or we've talked about the Great Reset, that was number 56, the normalcy bias, that was episode 61. When we talked about the Nuremberg Code, that was number 60. We talked about repressive tolerance and cancel culture, number 66. The Cloward-Piven strategy, number 33. Wow, that was a long time ago. And then Saul Alinsky, number 8. So conversation. Number 8. I know. God, that seems like so long ago.
It does.
Anyway.
That's still one of my favorites, so.
Harkens back to simple times before Norm and I were around.
Well, better times anyway.
I quit. I quit. I quit.
Don't make promises you can't keep.
We're going to talk about Milgram experiments. And I know this is something that you guys, because we've talked.
You don't want to get Milgram out in the middle of nowhere.
We don't want to get, not only in the middle of nowhere, but we don't want to get Milgram in the middle of Walgreens.
Milgram.
Anywhere at all. You don't want to be Milgram.
Not Milgram.
No.
Let's just talk about why, man.
Yeah, let's get into this, Jason. I want your take. I know my theory, but I want to hear your
first
take.
of all, Stanley Milgram, he's a Yale psychologist. It's like more than 50 years ago, he did an experiment, famous experiment, or infamous, if you will, experiment on destructive obedience. And it's known as Milgram's shocking experiment.
Pun intended.
Yeah, so he began his experiments in July 61.
Yes, if memory serves.
Okay, so July 61, and it was the same month that the Adolf Eichmann trial, the German bureaucrat who, was transporting the Jews to the extermination camps in the Holocaust, that concluded in Jerusalem that same time. And that trial was made famous by Hannah Arendt's reports.
She was a philosopher, I believe.
Yeah, well, and it was later in a book, I believe it was called Eichmann in Jerusalem. So Arndt claimed that Eichmann was a colorless bureaucrat who basically blandly followed orders without much thought. It was sheep, as if you go back a couple of episodes ago, without thought for consequences, and his obedient behavior demonstrated banality of evil.
It's really interesting. What do you got on that, Norm?
Well, I got a lot of information about this topic just floating around in my brain.
That's why we brought you in. That's why you're here.
So I just wanted to, share that information with you. You know, Milgram himself, he was Jewish. Did you guys know that?
I didn't know Milgram was Jewish.
His original question was whether nations other than Germany would differ in their degrees of conformity to authority. He assumed that the citizens of America...
What happens when you assume?
You make an ass out of you and me.
Okay, go ahead. So he assumed.
So he assumed that the citizens of America, which he considered home of rugged individualism and apple pie, those days might be over, he assumed that, you know, we would display much lower levels of conformity when commanded by authority.
Well, what I do know is that in Milgram's original experiment, I believe participants took part in what they thought was I think it called it a learning task. The task was actually designed to investigate how punishment, well, and in that case, in the form of electric shocks, I believe.
I thought we were going to be getting electric shock.
But he just really wanted to know how that affected their learning, from what I understand. The volunteers thought they were participants in pairs, but their partner was actually in part like a confederate of the experimenter, if I believe right. So anyway, there was a draw to determine who would be the teacher and who would be the learner in the situation. The whole thing was completely rigged, honestly. The true volunteer always ended up as the teacher, and the confederate, of course, was the learner.
Well, when you say confederate, you don't mean like a racist, democratic, southern...
Well, I mean, everything's interpretive these days. But,
Well, just want to clarify.
But from what I remember, like, the pairs were actually like moved into separate rooms and stuff, and they were connected by a microphone. The teacher, of course, would read aloud a series of like word pairs such as red hammer or a blue chisel. The learner was then instructed to memorize those things. The teacher then read the target word red, and the learner was to select the original paired word from the alternative, like something like ocean, fan, hammer, glue, punishment, you know, so on and so forth. And they would keep increasing the 15, like by like a 15 shot increment with the successor in error. So although the teacher couldn't see the learner was in the adjacent room, he could hear like the responses, of course, to the shocks that were going on, which that had to be, you know, a little jarring. But those shocks were all according to the questions that were being asked. So according to the like a prearranged script, at about 75 volts, the learner started to scream, of course, because every time you turn it up, it gets a little bit more dangerous. So from 150 to 330 volts, like he would protest with an increase in intensity, complaining that his heart was bothering him. Well, duh.
I do that after every McDonald's meal.
So anyway, at one point in
You
time,
actually
he
eat
would,
there?
refuse to actually go on any further. At that point in time, the teacher's questions were met by like just awkward silence. Although the shocks were maybe painful, they caused no permanent damage, of course, is what they would always say. But that's what I learned from that.
Well, you know what's crazy about all that? I mean, that's how the experiment was done, and the results is what's nuts, right? So Milgram himself was pretty horrified by the results, and in the remote condition version of the experiment, 65% of the subjects, that's 26 out of 40 subjects, continued to inflict shock all the way up to 450 volt level. Despite the screams of the learner and the protests, whatever. So they inflicted shock right up to 450 volt level, despite the learner's screams, protests, all that jazz, at the 330 volt level. So they're just cranking this thing up. And, you know, once participants reached 450 volts, they obeyed the experimenter's instructions to deliver additional 450 volt shocks every time the subject continued to fail the response, right? Get the wrong response or didn't respond. So not responding, they're just knocking with another 450 volts. Based on the teacher just telling them or the whatever, just saying, come on, keep going. As you just coach them to do it, they're like,
Well, I mean, at least not everybody got a trophy.
I don't know. So, Norm, can you put all this into context for us?
I'll try.
Do or do not. There is no
Beginning of
try.
Ghostbusters when he was doing that electric shock.
Yeah, he was doing the
treatment.
milk
Oh, yeah.
experiment.
Pretty girl.
Yeah, actually, yeah, that's
Well, he was doing it right. He was doing it to get dates. But
Yeah.
well.
You didn't tell me we were going to be getting electric shock.
she was always right. What am I thinking? You're wrong to the guy. Girl.
And he was 100% right. Yeah.
He's like, I don't know, 3 wiggly lines. Sorry. Let me put this into context for you guys. Basically, Milgram's experiments became the subject of a host of moral and methodological critiques in the 60s. These became mute with the publication of American Psychological Association Ethical Principles Research with Human Subject in 1973. Did you guys know that?
No.
Restrictions on the use of human subjects included in the National Research Act of 1974, that just popped in my head, which effectively precluded psychologists from conducting experiments that, well, like Milgram's, were likely to cause serious distress to the subjects. This was a good thing for experimental subjects, but it also blocked attempts to answer a question that many were asking. Did Milgram's experiment demonstrate that humans have a universal propensity to destructive obedience, that they are merely products of their cultural moment? Also, not sure if you guys knew this, but cross-cultural studies at the time also provided an answer. The U.S. mean obedience rate of 60.94% was not significantly different from the foreign mean obedience rate of 65.94%, although there was wide variation in the results. The rates range from 31 to 91% in the U.S. and from 28 to 87.5% in foreign studies.
So what you're saying, in other words, people who were happy to ignore the evidence before their eyes in order to conform to the group consensus. So if we were to try to apply Milgram's work into today's standards and what we can learn from it and take from it today, I would say that although full replications of Milgram's experiment are precluded in the United States because of obviously ethical and legal constraints on experimenters, there have been replications still that are attempting to work their way in other countries, and attempts by our own U.S. experimenters to sidestep these constraints probably happen as well. Like a replication conducted by, I was reading an article, I think the guy's name was like Darius Dolinsky, if I'm pronouncing it right. Anyway, him and some of his colleagues, I think it was like 2015, 2016, somewhere around there, generated some levels of obedience higher than the original Milgram experiment that we were talking about earlier. Although the study may be criticized because it employed lower levels of shocks, the results obviously were still the same. And more intriguing, I think it was a few years before that, I think it was like 08, maybe in 09, there was a replication by a guy named Jerry Berger who found an ingenious way of navigating the ethical concerns about Milgram's original experiment. Berger noted that in the original experiment, 79% of the subjects who continued after the 150 volts, that was after the learners, of course, first screams, continued all the way to the end of the scale. And like at 100, maybe it was 450 volts, if I'm not mistaken, they were assuming that the same would be true of the subjects today. Berger determined, however, many were willing to deliver shocks way beyond the 150 volt level, at which point the experiment was then, of course, discontinued. I think it was like about 70% were willing to continue the experiment at this point, suggesting that the subject remains just as compliant in the 21st century. Nonetheless, Berger's study was based upon a questionable assumption, of course. So, namely, that 150 volt compliance has remained a reliable predictor of the 450 volt compliance. So, subjects today might be willing to go a bit beyond the 150, but perhaps not to the far end of the scale that we were talking about earlier. So, after learners demand that the experiment be discontinued, of course, I think the assumption begs there's a critical question that should be answered here.
I don't think so. I think it would absolutely, they would keep going.
Well, I think we're going to talk about that in a moment.
Well, yeah, I mean, one of the optimistic findings of the original Milgram experiment was his condition 7, which a lot of people don't know about, in which there were 3 teachers, 2 of whom, both Confederates of the experiment, so as we said, the Confederate, these are the guys who are in on it, right? They defied the experimenter. Given this social support, most subjects refused to continue to administer shocks, suggesting that social solidarity serves as a kind of defense against destructive obedience to authority. So don't get Milgram'd. Basically what we're saying, for all you folks who haven't got it yet, Milgram'd is basically don't get hoodwinked, don't blindly follow, question. Kind of the opposite of what you're hearing in some of our other episodes from the instructions that have been given. Don't question, don't think, don't search for data.
I would take it a step further in that do not continue to inflict pain onto your fellow citizen.
I hear you, but you got to say it in such a way where they're, right, these are some sheep, so let's explain to them. We're not saying pain is in don't stab your citizens. Pain can be a lot of different things.
Well, sure. There was an example in recent articles and things like viral videos, things like that, a couple different incidents that happened within the last week that I think is an absolute result of a mass Milgram experiment that's been going on, not just in America, but throughout the world.
Yeah, you've actually got, you put an article out here. Norm, you want to read that article, man?
I sure do, Jason. Thanks for asking.
Anytime, bud.
Viral video catches wild fight between customers and employees in Bath and Body Works. A viral video captured customers and employees brawling in an Arizona Bath and Body Works, allegedly because one woman was standing too close to another woman. Get off me, a female customer shouts in the video as a staffer pushes her face. Let go of me, the customer says as multiple people tackle her to the ground. The group wrestles on the floor, pulling hair as a male staffer grabs one woman and shows her to the door. Get out now, he screams, pulling 2 other women to the door. So they were fighting because, what, she wasn't wearing a mask?
She wasn't wearing a mask, but also she wasn't social distancing. So those are 2 sins. Those are.
So their answer was to get on top of her and close enough to pull her hair and push her.
Well, yeah, but the Milgram thing is here, the employee pushes this lady's face, and the employee then gets backed up by everyone else there.
Ding, 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 ding. Right. So, Jason, you alluded to when there were Confederates brought in to help the teacher, there was a solidarity solidarity in whatever respect was going on. So if it was to diminish the punishment, if there's a solidarity in that, then that happened. If there was a tendency to be more provocative and to increase the voltage during the Milgram experiment with the Confederate help to the teacher, then that happened.
Okay.
This is exactly what we see going on here. You know, the most heinous sin that you can commit in America today, other than being a thought criminal, is not complying with the medical tyranny of the hour.
My bottom line is this. I don't believe in the mask policy that Fauci and whoever else puts out there. What I do believe in is the rights of small businesses and the rights of individuals.
So let's just put that aside for a moment. What we're talking about is a Milgram experiment on a nationwide scale.
Right.
A similar thread, a similar theme is being woven into this horrible tapestry of disgusting and ugliness. And what I want to point out is that we talk a lot about this, is the idea of predictive programming. See, Milgram warned us about what would happen. The larger point is that people are so obedient to quote unquote authority. Now, medical tyranny is the logical and most productive and exponential way to impose their evil and tyrannical will on people, because by and large, people are subjugated to doctors, physicians, because they have usually unquestioned authority.
That's where I say, I believe you question. You question everything.
Right.
If you feel like something's not right, you question that. You question that within your rights.
These are great points. Norm, there's 2 articles here I want you to read. And this is where people are going to get mad at me for bringing this up.
Here you go.
That's what Bill does.
Like literally, when I have discussions with people, they think I have one monolithic view on things, and I just don't. And you guys know I'm rather complex with my thoughts. I think these 2 articles are going to really illustrate that.
Ew, some people are bugs, some people are windshields. I don't know. Dr. Fauci hopes Trump will push his supporters to get COVID-19 vaccine. Reuters. This is ridiculous. Dr. Anthony Fauci, the top U.S. infectious disease expert, said on Sunday he hopes former President Donald Trump will push his supporters to get the COVID-19 vaccine, and emphasized that pandemic-related restrictions should not be lifted prematurely. In a PBS NewsHour poll released last week, about half of U.S. men who are identified themselves as Republicans said they had no plans to get the vaccine. Asked whether Trump should speak to his supporters directly given those poll numbers, Fauci said on the Fox News Sunday program, "I think it would make all the difference in the world. Trump," Fauci said, "is such a strongly popular person, it would be very helpful for the effort for that to happen."
3/16 is when that article was written. Norm, read the next article and note the date.
Trump urges supporters to get great COVID-19 vaccines. New York Post, March 16, 2021. Former President Donald Trump on Tuesday said that he wants his supporters to take the great COVID-19 vaccines that were developed during his administration. Trump said in a Fox News interview with Maria Bartiromo that he wasn't pleased that many Republicans say they don't want to get the shots. "I would recommend it, and I would recommend it to a lot of people that don't want to get it. And a lot of those people voted for me, frankly," Trump said. "We have our freedoms and we have to live by that, and I agree with that also. But it's a great vaccine, it's a safe vaccine, and it's something that works." A poll released last week by NPR, PBS, and Marist found 41% of Republicans don't plan to get a vaccine versus 34% of independents and 11% of Democrats. President Biden, who said last week that there will be enough vaccine supply for all Americans to sign up for shots in May, scoffed Monday about Trump's potential influence over his supporters. Biden, who rarely mentions Trump by name, said local doctors and religious leaders hold greater influence among MAGA folks. "I discussed it with my team, and they say the thing that has more impact than anything Trump would say to the MAGA folks is what the local doctor, what the local preacher, what the local people in the community say," Biden said.
Clergy response teams, roll them out, brother.
So that was March 16.
Well, I just want to share this piece of data from March 19, okay? The piece of data that I heard, I didn't read it, I heard it on a local news station or whatever, is that 52%, I'll rephrase that, only 52% of all medical workers have received at least one shot of the vaccine. So that means there's 48% of medical workers who haven't yet, and a lot of those, again, this is what they reported, don't plan on getting the vaccine. There's some numbers for you.
I will not get it. So if this podcast suddenly stops in May, you'll know what.
Warning! Going down for the sound off. Yeah.
Anyone who wants to get it, I think that's great. I have no problem with it.
Sure.
I'm not going to get it. But I'm not in a spot where I think I need to get it. And this is the other crazy thing is what they're saying is, well, you should get it so you don't give it to other people. right? But this thing, if everyone else has the vaccine, but then they're like, well, the vaccine doesn't actually stop you from getting it. But yet they're also making changes saying if you got the vaccine, you don't have to do this or you don't have to do that. Or, I mean, the NBA is doing that now. Everyone's doing that. It's like, it's all over the place. It's whatever they want.
Here's the thing about the...
It's not a vaccine, folks. It's called a COVID shot, just like the flu shot.
So this goes back to why there's no FDA approval, why there's an emergency release. Like, and I know people are going to argue, and that's fine. People can do what they want. Really, when you break this down, this is not a healthy thing to do. Now, that's my opinion.
Well, story last night, I was out having a beverage with a friend who's moving out of town, and his boss received his first shot. 2 days later, he's in the hospital with a...
Well, Marvin Hagler was killed by these shots. Hank Aaron was killed by these shots. And these target black people specifically because they need a higher level of vitamin D, which naturally combats this, as it does other viruses and illnesses. And look who's running this thing. Bill Gates, Fauci. These people are involved in eugenics. Bill Gates has a long history of being a eugenicist and coming from that line. Of course, they want to decimate this population of our citizenry and of the world, which if you look, there's 26 countries that have banned the Moderna and the Pfizer, and now they're looking at banning the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. But here in America, they're rolling it out.
No, it's just like if you look at other countries, a lot of the shit they put in the food in America is not allowed to be put in food in other countries. We allow whatever as long as there's money involved.
Well, what's interesting is I told you I was watching I've been on this Kubrick film kick.
Right.
And in the middle of Doctor Strangelove last night, the guy's like, I just was in the act of the physical passion of love making, and I realized that I've had too much fluoride in my body, and I'm paraphrasing, but back in the early 60s when this was made, he was bringing out, Stanley Kubrick was talking about these additives and these different things that are found in our water, in our food, and everything that we consume that aren't natural. I have a friend actually who was a missionary in China, and he said the French fries in McDonald's in America, they are what they are. But when you go to China or when you go to other places like in Europe, for example, they're real potatoes. But in America, they're not. I mean, just think about that. We get this homogenized, chemically enhanced thing that actually, and I love these videos like on YouTube where you can light a McDonald's French fry and use it like as a candle. Like potatoes don't do that, folks.
Listen to this. I used to work with a guy at a large corporation a few years ago, and he did this experiment. He bought an Egg McMuffin from McDonald's one morning. He actually bought a couple of them. He ate one, and he's like, I want to do something. And he put her up on his desk, unwrapped it, put her up on his desk. He's like, I want to see how long it takes for this thing to form mold. I am not kidding you. 2 years. 2 years later, that thing looked exactly the same as it did when it was unwrapped from the package. It got hard, but it was like, I mean,
Great
think
experiment.
about that, though.
Well,
Sandwich sat on his desk for 2 years and never formed 1 ounce of mold.
What the hell?
My larger point being
that's bread.
and I'm sorry, with Trump, this to me is a perfect example of a Milgram experiment in action. Fauci says jump. Even Trump says how high, as most of the people in America do. Let me share a couple things right here. Always we try to bring in the spiritual aspect. Matthew 24, verses 24 to 25. This is from the Amplified Bible. It says, for false Christs and false prophets will appear and will provide great signs and wonders to deceive, if possible, even the elect, God's chosen ones. Listen carefully if I've told you in advance. This is what it says in the message. It says, if anyone tries to flag you down, calling out, here's fake messiahs and lying preachers are going to pop up everywhere. Their massive credentials and bewitching performances will pull the wool over the eyes of even those who should know better. But I've given you fair warning. This is what it says in 1 Corinthians 15:33. Do not be misled. Bad company corrupts good character. This is Hose's
truth.
Yes, which just completely emphasizes the whole Milgram.
That's what I teach my kids all the time. Put yourself around good people.
Isaiah 4-6, and this is the message says, my people are ruined because they do not know what's right and true, because you've turned your back on knowledge. But a constitution of government once changed from freedom can never be restored. Liberty once lost is lost forever. And I'm sorry for people who keep thinking that everyone's going to get vaccinated and the masks are going to come off. No, never has a society handed over their freedoms and have ever gotten them back.
Ever. Remember,
never.
Folks, ever. If you don't think what's going on right now is us handing over our freedoms, you're sorely mistaken.
And it goes beyond the mask. Listen, please hear my words. I don't give a crap what people wear. I really don't. And the mask is just the tip of the spear. And this is why I've been talking about this for so long, because with the tip of the spear, that's the first part that punctures. That's not the part that does the damage. The deeper that spear is is injected into the flesh, the more damage it. Now, past the masks comes these vaccines that are not FDA approved. And I've talked to a handful of people that have gotten it. They felt worse.
Bad.
They felt very, very bad. I'm sorry. Marvin Hagler's best friend came out and said he was perfectly healthy. He got the second shot and he died. The same thing with Hank Aaron. At first, they tried to smooth it over, but after they had spoken to the family, that's what happened. There's a direct connection. And I can't.
They had him live on TV. They got him to promote the shot. They have him live
Right.
on TV talking about how safe it is. He was fine.
And
He was totally fine talking to everyone on TV.
Right.
And then he's dead.
And this is the whole idea of the Milgram experiment. This is this group think, right? This idea that I read these articles about people not wearing a mask and getting physically assaulted. There's something that's collectively happened to a large portion of our citizenry that they have villainized people that just have a different way of thinking and a different way of looking at things. They villainized the majority. If we're going based on the Coca-Cola theory, the critical race theory that hopefully we'll talk about in an upcoming episode, that the population of a country is now just massively labeled racist for no other reason, just on their appearance. There's all these things that are happening that are these false narratives being pushed, and we have to wake up. Absolutely have to wake up. And people are being pushed into a corner, and this is why I argue with especially people who are Christians. They're already talking in Europe and Canada that if you don't have a vaccine, you're not going to have a travel passport, you're not going to be able to work, you're not going to be able to buy, sell, or trade. If that doesn't harken back, especially people of faith, to that Revelation 13 mark of the beast system, maybe it's not a chip on your hand or your forehead, but this system is being installed right before our eyes. And we're not speaking out about it like we need to. We're not educating people like we must, because if people want to accept the mark of the beast, they want to go along with it. That's their prerogative. Really, it is. It sucks, but I don't want that. I want to stand in resistance to that evil tyranny.
Yeah, I mean, I believe the mark of the beast is going to be an actual mark, not a vaccine. But I do agree that this type of thing, you have to get this vaccine in order to shop, sell. But it's definitely preparing.
Right. It's pre-programming.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
You and I differ on that, but the idea is still the same. We need to be aware that this is being introduced, and more than introduced, it's being implemented.
The mark of the beast. The what? Mark of the beast. Never, ever, ever get the mark of the beast. The mark of the beast in your hand or your head means that you're living in the land of the dead.
So listen, there is a Law & Order out. It's called Law & Order Special Victims Unit. It's that series.
AKA SVU.
I don't know. But listen, it's season 9, episode 17. The name of the episode is Authority. And Robin Williams is in it, okay?
The Robin Williams?
The Robin Williams. So this is from 2008. The life of a law-abiding engineer, Robin Williams, goes terribly wrong, leading him to challenge authority and to urge others to do so as well. So basically, his child was born. He saw something was wrong with his wife, right? And the doctor said, no, that's normal. Everything's normal. Blah, blah, blah. And 5 minutes later, she was dead. He didn't challenge the authority. He just assumed, even though he knew something wasn't right. And it goes a little deeper than that, but you got to watch it. So he decides, he's going to do some things to get people's attention. One of the things he does is calls a fast food restaurant, and girl answers, and over the phone, he acts like he's a police officer and talks her into stripping naked right there because he was a person of authority and he got her to believe him based on the story that he gave. And then they came after him, right? And then he did all these other things, but it just talks about how people in authority can get people to do anything.
Right.
They don't question it. And it's a great episode to watch. I'm telling you, it goes right to what we're talking about.
Well, think even about like when Biden or Fauci says, we'd rather have pastors or we'd rather have doctors. We would rather have people in direct authority.
Right. The whole Hollywood famous people.
Oh, right. Well, celebrities know best.
Pretty soon we'll be eating them. About that article that we read about Trump should come out and tell people to get the vaccine. How much influence does that really have? I think you'd be
surprised.
My opinion about the mask has nothing to do with whether or not I support Donald Trump or not. I could care less whether the President of the United States wears a mask or not. I'm going to do what I feel is right for myself. Right. How many people actually look at the
well, here's the thing.
Well, Trump's not wearing a mask, so I'm not wearing one. Part of the false narrative.
Yes. Now you're a thought criminal. But here's the thing. YouTube, I'm not saying anything other than this is what it is. Like, some people think he's still the president. So,
Oh, son of a bitch.
But he does still hold sway and influence over people.
So he's a sheepdog.
Well, or is he a wolf now? That's the question. See, and that's why I don't mind pointing out, like, when I have it. Well,
I mean, look, if you have influence over people and they'll follow you blindly, you're a sheepdog.
Well, I don't put my faith and hope in people. When it comes, especially governance,
well,
when it comes to governance, I look at policy and legislation.
Or I'm sorry, he's a wolf. You're right.
Yeah,
he's a wolf.
Really nothing to do with the person. I don't support Trump because of the man. I support Trump because of the policies,
the stances
that he took.
But once again, Norm, that you and this is why, like, we as a collective are here to challenge the popular narrative to say, wait a second, come to whatever conclusion you want to, but at least put some thought, at least do some reading, and at least understand the basis for the decision that you're making. And I'll tell you this too, and I want to reiterate the point where I'm talking about the eugenics. I had to go to pick up one of the 80 pills I take every day, and they were giving the COVID shot, and I was listening because it took literally half an hour to get these pills. They asked everybody, are you Black, Latino, or Asian descent? Like everybody, even if you can plainly tell that they weren't. And I thought, that's such an interesting question. Why, of everything to ask, would they ask that?
My answer would have been yes.
So I don't know. I just think this is something to think about, because I believe that what's happened in our culture, in our world, we've been under this conditioned Milgram experiment. We've been Milgram'd.
It's amazing how fast the mainstream media and people just, twist stories and produce this false narrative. Like this recent shooting in Atlanta.
False flag.
The guy himself who did the shooting talked about how twisted his mind is and his sexual addiction, and he was removing temptation out of his life. That's a sick, twisted thing. Not once did he mention, I hate Asian women or I hate Asian people. But somehow it's turned into, white people are now racist against Asian people. There's enough people who are going to fall for that lie.
And I believe all this is just narratives to cause more division. Like, why does stuff need to be stirred up with every minority? Think about it. Because as we go back and we revisit the words of Christ himself, a kingdom divided against itself cannot stand. Were there atrocities committed against Japanese people in our country in the 40s? Absolutely. Japanese people were put in internment camps.
By our government.
By our government, absolutely.
It wasn't random civilians like capturing some Japanese people and putting them in cages. It was our federal government that was doing it.
Yes, that's exactly right. And has there been atrocities? Yes. Is that horrible? Absolutely. I'm not condoning that, but what I'm saying is that there is this purposeful and deliberate attempt to brainwash, control, divide, demoralize, and then subdue the population of America. Because once again, once our light has been diminished, the world becomes a much darker place.
Amen to that.
Okay, any closing thoughts then?
Clothing thoughts?
Closing, not clothing.
Clothing time. Thanks for the coffee, gentlemen.
Thanks for creamsick, Norm. John, any thoughts?
I'm fresh out of thoughts.
Okay. Jason?
More God.
I got a thought. I've been thinking this week about how profound that statement that Patrick Henry said, give me liberty or give me death.
I know not what course some men might take, but as for me, give me liberty or give me death. Yes.
I would rather lose my life than lose the freedoms that we have. And I mean that with all sincerity.
Absolutely.
I would rather go to the great beyond, where I know I'm going to live eternally forever with my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, than to live in a communistic or globalistic society. And I mean that with every ounce of my being.
I concur. I hope if we can inspire anything, that would be what we can inspire. But that people would understand that spirit of freedom and live and dwell and promote that. I think freedom is a sexy and provocative idea. Like I've always said, freedom is Pam Grier 1976 to me. So with that being said, we want to thank you guys for listening to another wonderfully thought-provoking and triggering episode of Flawedcast. Make sure you subscribe. We are on everywhere you can listen to podcasts, Flawedcast CLE, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. We are on YouTube. We are on Rumble. Please subscribe. Our website's flawedinc.com. You can message us at info@flawedinc.com. My daily Flawed vlogs are there as well. And we're on the Project Mockingbird social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We are on Gab, doing well on Gab. We're back on Parler, and we're on MeWe. So with that being said, don't get Milgram'd.
My tongue is swollen, so speaking's kind of weird. It's pretty interesting. But I listened to Biden speak yesterday, and I've never listened to him speak since he's been president. And I cannot believe
Not the rest of the country.
I can't believe he's actually the person who's president of the United States. Like, he couldn't read the teleprompter at all.
Oh, son of a bitch.
Well, thanks to Mr. Most Popular President Ever, I just got some ducats.
Yeah, well, we haven't got
got your own
ducats
stimmy
for
money?
anything.
I did, but you know what I've decided? Just in spite of the government, I'm going to spend it all on gold or storable food and ammunition. I haven't decided which one.
Should it be I don't want to get Milgram'd or don't get Milgram'd?
What did I write?
You wrote I don't want to get Milgram'd out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah,
You put don't get Milgram'd out in the middle of nowhere.
Well, yeah, we'll say it the right way then.
Which way?
Yeah, you ever see Kingpin when
No,
he's like,
I know. I was just
I
asking.
don't want to get Munson in the middle of nowhere.
Can I get an action, please? Flawedcast number 72. I don't want to get Milgram'd out in the middle of nowhere.
Hold on,
You're kind of right in the middle.
yeah, can you do
Actually,
that
I
again?
started it, then you grabbed your mic, but that's okay.
No, I didn't. They did.
That's what I'm talking about.
That's
I'm just
they.
not looking. I'm just not looking at John right now.
There's no
Hey,
they.
we're
That
one-
they be right there did it.
You know what? I don't like your angsty attitude, Norm. Bring you straight to the only.
Your privilege is showing. Listen, you white honky cracker.
Norm is failing in his new role.
Flawedcast number 72.
Who the hell was that?
That was a subpar imitation of you.
So you want me to talk like that the whole entire time?
Come on, dude. It would be awesome.
guarantee you.
Hey, you
wouldn't
know
be
I
the whole
don't
time.
be talking so good. Methodological.
Methodological.
I didn't.
Methodological. Methodological.
Every week.
Moral and methodological. I hate you guys.
I.
Please say that like Stallone once, because that would be.
Methodological.
I got a little punch in.
Well,
I'm
you
not
guys make me
stupid.
say.
I'm not stupid. I got a little punch in. Maybe you did.
You guys make me say big words like host,
Methodological.
subject. Fudge, man.